The banker's hand slammed down on the desk, so hard the inkwell jumped, and Willa Nelson felt the sound reverberate through her chest like a physical blow. She stood there in her Sunday dress, the only one without patches, her hands folded tightly at her waist as three men in expensive suits stared her down from behind the massive oak desk that seemed designed to make anyone standing before it feel small. "Miss Nelson, you have exactly 1 week to come up with the full amount, or the bank will foreclose on your father's ranch," Harrison Carmichael said, his jowls quivering with what looked like barely contained satisfaction. "That is $5,000, cash." It was April 1882, and Kingman, Arizona was a town that had grown up rough around the railroad tracks. The spring sun beat down mercilessly even this early in the season, and dust blew through the streets in little devils that scattered whenever a horse passed by. Willa had walked 3 miles from the ranch that morning, her boots raising puffs of red dirt with every step, rehearsing what she would say. She had prepared numbers, had brought the ledgers showing how the cattle sales would more than cover the loan payments if they just extended the deadline by 3 months until the drive to market. But Carmichael had not even looked at her ledgers. "Sir, if you would just examine these figures," Willa said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her knees. She was 22 years old, and for the past year since her father had died of pneumonia, she had run the ranch herself with the help of 2 aging ranch hands. She had kept everything going, had even managed to increase the herd. "The spring drive is in June. We will have more than enough to pay the full amount with interest." The terms of the loan were quite clear, Carmichael said, exchanging glances with the 2 other men flanking him. Gerald Price and Thomas Sutton, both members of the town council, both friends of Carmichael. "Your father signed papers agreeing to full payment by May 1st. That date is in 1 week. My father was dying when he signed those papers," Willa said, and now her voice did shake, but not with fear. With anger. "He was out of his head with fever. You knew he would never make that deadline." Carmichael leaned back in his chair, and Willa saw something flicker across his face that made her stomach turn. It was pleasure. Pure, simple pleasure at watching her stand there, at watching her try to hold her ground while they held all the cards. "Miss Nelson," he said slowly, savoring each word, "perhaps we could discuss alternative arrangements. If you were to approach this matter with the proper attitude, with the respect owed to men of our position, we might be persuaded to show leniency." Willa understood then what they wanted. They wanted her to beg. They wanted her to cry, to plead, to prostrate herself before them so they could feel magnanimous when they maybe, possibly if they felt like it, granted her an extension. They wanted her to acknowledge their power and her powerlessness. "I am showing you respect by bringing you documented proof that the loan can be repaid," Willa said, her chin lifting. "I am showing you respect by meeting my obligations as a borrower and coming to you with a reasonable business proposal." "Business," Sutton snorted, speaking for the first time. "Women do not understand business, Miss Nelson. Ranching is man's work. Perhaps it is time you accepted that and looked for a husband to take care of these matters." The heat that flooded through Willa then had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. "The ranch has turned a profit every year since my father bought it, including this past year when I was running it." "On your knees," Price said suddenly, his eyes glittering. "If you got on your knees and asked us properly like a woman should, maybe we would consider your request." The room went very still. Willa felt the words hit her like a slap, felt the humiliation they intended wash over her. But underneath, the humiliation was a core of pure steel that her father had forged in her when he taught her to ride, to rope, to shoot, to handle accounts. She met each man's eyes in turn. I will see you in 1 week, she said quietly. With the money or with a lawyer. She walked out of that bank with her head high, but once she was outside in the brutal sunlight, the reality of her situation crashed over her. $5,000 in 1 week. She had maybe $800 in available cash. The cattle were not ready for market yet. She could sell off the herd early at a devastating loss, or she could lose everything. Willa stood on the wooden sidewalk, shielding her eyes against the glare, and tried to think. The street was busy with midday traffic, wagons hauling goods, men on horseback, women with parasols ducking into the general store. No one looked at her. No one knew that her entire world was crumbling. You look like you just went 10 rounds with a grizzly and came out on the losing end. The voice was low and warm, tinged with amusement but not unkind. Willa turned and found herself looking at a man leaning against the post outside the bank, one boot hooked over the other, his hat tipped back just enough that she could see his face. He was tall and lean in the way men got when they spent their lives in the saddle, with a weathered face that said he was somewhere in his mid-20s and had spent most of those years under the sun. His eyes were a startling gray-green, like sage after rain. "I am fine," Willa said automatically, then realized her hands were shaking and shoved them into the folds of her skirt. "That is the least convincing fine I have heard in my life," the man said. He straightened up, and Willa noticed he wore his gun tied low on his thigh, the holster worn smooth from use. "Name is Quinn Everett. Most folks call me Quinn." "I did not ask," Willa said, more sharply than she intended. But she was wrung out from the confrontation, from holding herself together in that office, and she had no energy left for polite small talk with a stranger. Quinn did not look offended. If anything, his expression softened. "No, you did not. But you looked like you could use someone who is not a complete stranger anymore. I have been around Kingman for a few weeks now, doing some work for the Matheson Ranch up north. Heard some things about how Carmichael operates." Despite herself, Willa felt her attention sharpen. "What kind of things?" "The kind where he gives loans to people he knows cannot pay them back on time, then forecloses and takes their property for a fraction of what it is worth," Quinn said. His voice was still easy, conversational, but there was an edge to it now. "He has picked up 6 ranches that way in the past 3 years, sells them to a land company back east for a nice profit." Willa felt sick. "My father's ranch is worth 10 times what he loaned us." "I expect so," Quinn said. "You are Willa Nelson, right? Heard about you too." "Heard you have been running that place single-handed since Jacob Nelson passed. Heard you are doing a damn fine job of it too." Something in Willa's chest loosened slightly at the matter-of-fact way he said it, with no condescension, no surprise that a woman could run a ranch. "Not fine enough if I lose it in a week." How much do they want? Willa should not tell him, should not trust this stranger with a tied-down gun and an easy smile. But she was desperate, and desperation made people do things they normally would not. $5,000 by May 1st. Quinn let out a low whistle. "That is a hell of a lot of money. How much do you have?" $800 in cash, about $3,000 in cattle, but they are not ready for market. I would take a massive loss if I tried to sell now. So you need to buy time." "They will not give it to me," Willa said flatly. "I just tried. They want me to beg, and even then I do not think they would extend the deadline. They want the ranch." Something flickered across Quinn's face then, something hard and cold that made him look suddenly dangerous. "They wanted you to beg?" "Yes." The word came out bitter. Quinn was quiet for a long moment, his eyes fixed on the bank behind her. Then he looked back at her, and his expression had shifted into something that might have been determination. "What if you had a way to make that deadline without begging?" "I am listening," Willa said warily. "I have money saved," Quinn said. About $4,000. Been working and saving for 5 years to buy my own place. I will loan it to you. Willa stared at him. You do not even know me. I know you are getting railroaded by men who want to watch you fail, Quinn said. I know you are standing here trying to figure out how to fight instead of crying or giving up. That is enough. Why would you do this? Willa demanded. What do you want right now? Nothing. I want you to walk back into that bank in a week and put that money on Carmichael's desk without saying a single word of please or thank you. Quinn's smile was sharp as a knife. I want to see his face when you do it. And later, Willa pressed. No one loans money without expecting something in return. Quinn considered this. Fair enough. Here is my proposal. I loan you the money at the same interest rate Carmichael is charging, which I am guessing is excessive. You pay me back after your cattle drive. In the meantime, I need work. You need ranch hands. I will work for you for standard wages plus room and board until the debt is settled. It was too good to be true. Had to be. Willa looked at this man, this stranger, and tried to find the trap. What is the catch? No catch, Quinn said. Except I expect to be treated like any other ranch hand. I pull my weight, you pay me fair wages, and we are square. The loan is separate. Business deal, pure and simple. Why? Willa asked again because she needed to understand. Quinn's expression went distant for a moment. Had a sister once. She was smart, capable, could outride most men I knew. She married a man who told her she was not good enough, not smart enough, needed him for everything. She believed him eventually, died believing she was worthless. He refocused on Willa. I do not like men who try to make strong women feel small. And I have a feeling you are stronger than the whole lot of those bankers combined. Willa's throat tightened. She wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to grab this lifeline with both hands. But she had not kept the ranch going for a year by being impulsive. I need to think about it. Fair, Quinn said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a scrap of paper and a pencil stub, scrawled something, and handed it to her. I am staying at the boarding house on 3rd Street. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. After that, I have another job offer I need to take if I am not working for you. Willa took the paper, their fingers brushing briefly. His hands were calloused, scarred across the knuckles. Working hands. Thank you for the offer, I mean. Do not thank me yet, Quinn said. Wait until you see if I am any good at ranching. He tipped his hat to her and walked away, his stride loose and easy, and Willa watched him go with her mind spinning. It could be a trick, could be a scheme of some kind, but what would be the point? If she did not pay Carmichael, she lost the ranch anyway. If Quinn was planning to cheat her somehow, he would have to wait until after she paid off the bank, which meant at least she would still own her land. And there had been something in his eyes when he talked about his sister. Something raw and real that you could not fake. Willa walked back to where she had tied her horse, a sturdy bay mare named Copper, and rode home through the afternoon heat. The ranch was 10 miles outside Kingman, nestled in a valley with hills rising on 3 sides, and a creek running through the property that stayed wet most of the year. It was not big by some standards, just 3,000 acres, but it was good land with good water, and her father had loved every inch of it. The ranch hands, Pete and Samuel, both in their 60s, were mending fence when she rode up. They looked at her face and did not ask questions, just waved and went back to work. They were good men, loyal, but they were getting old for this kind of labor. She needed help. That night, Willa sat at her father's desk in the small ranch house and looked at the numbers again. Looked at the deed to the ranch. Looked at the photograph of her father on his wedding day, young and hopeful with her mother beside him in a white dress. Her mother had died when Willa was 8, and her father had never remarried, had poured all his love and energy into the ranch and into raising his daughter. What do I do? Willa whispered to the photograph. But her father could not answer, and she was alone with the decision. Except she was not really alone anymore, was she? There was a stranger with gray-green eyes who had offered her a way out, no begging required. Willa barely slept that night. She was up before dawn, did the morning chores by lamplight, and was on Copper riding toward Kingman as the sun broke over the eastern hills. The boarding house on 3rd Street was a neat 2-story building with a porch and flower boxes in the windows. Willa tied Copper to the rail and knocked on the door. The landlady who answered was a stout woman with kind eyes who directed Willa to the dining room, where a few early risers were having breakfast. Quinn was sitting alone at a corner table with coffee and eggs, reading a week-old newspaper. He looked up when Willa entered and something shifted in his expression. "Relief, maybe, Miss Nelson," he said, standing. "Can I buy you breakfast? I need coffee," Willa admitted. "And I need to know if your offer was real." "Real as rain," Quinn said. He gestured to the chair across from him, and Willa sat. The landlady brought coffee without being asked, and Willa wrapped her hands around the hot cup like it could anchor her. "If I take your loan, if you come work at the ranch, this is a business arrangement," Willa said. "I will not have people talking." "Agreed," Quinn said. "I will bunk with Pete and Samuel in the ranch headquarters, everything above board." "The interest rate Carmichael set was 8%, Willa said. "That is robbery, but it is what it is." "I will pay you the same on the portion you loan me. Deal." "And if you do not pull your weight, you are fired," Willa added. "I do not care how much money I owe you." Quinn's mouth quirked. "Would not have it any other way." Willa took a breath. "Then yes, I accept your offer." She saw the satisfaction flash across Quinn's face, the same kind of fierce pleasure she had seen in Carmichael's eyes, but this was entirely different. This was the pleasure of doing something right, something good. "When do you want to go to the bank?" Quinn asked. "Tomorrow," Willa said. "I want to make them wait the full week. Want them to think they have one right up until I walk in that door." Quinn grinned. "You are vindictive. I like that." "I am practical," Willa corrected. "Gives me time to make sure the ranch is ready for a new hand and to finalize the paperwork between us." They spent the rest of breakfast working out the details. Quinn would come to the ranch that afternoon with his gear. They would draw up a proper loan agreement and work contract. Willa would pay him $30 a month plus room and board, standard wages for an experienced ranch hand. The loan would be repaid in full by August 1st, after the cattle drive, with interest. It was all very businesslike and proper, and yet Willa could not shake the feeling that she had just made a decision that would change everything, and not just in the obvious ways. Quinn rode out to the ranch that afternoon, with his possessions packed in saddlebags on a tall black gelding with one white sock. Pete and Samuel eyed him warily at first, protective of Willa, but Quinn won them over within an hour by fixing the gate they had been struggling with, and then helping Samuel haul water for the stock without being asked. By dinner, which Willa cooked and they all ate together at the long table in the ranch house kitchen, the two older men were telling stories and laughing, and Quinn was fitting in like he had always been there. Willa watched him over her plate of beans and cornbread, watched how he listened when Pete talked about the best grazing areas, how he asked Samuel's opinion on the new calf in the north pasture. He was careful not to act like he knew everything, did not try to take over, but he clearly knew his way around a ranch. "Where did you work before Matheson's place?" Samuel asked. "All over," Quinn said. "Spent time in Texas, New Mexico, even up in Colorado for a winter. Worked ranches, did some scouting for wagon trains, hired on with the railroad for a while." "Why move around so much?" Pete asked. Quinn shrugged. "Was looking for something. Took me a while to figure out what." "And now?" Willa found herself asking. Those gray-green eyes met hers across the table. Now I am thinking maybe I was looking for a place to stay put. The next morning, Willa put on her Sunday dress again, pinned up her dark hair with extra care, and counted out $800 from her cash box. Quinn added $4,200 to it, making up the difference they needed. $5,000 exactly in cash, in a leather pouch that Willa held tightly as they rode together into Kingman. "You do not have to come," Willa said as they approached the bank. "This is my fight." "No," Quinn said mildly. "This is your victory. I just want to watch." So they walked into the bank together, and the clerk's eyes widened when he saw them. Carmichael was in his office, and Willa did not wait to be announced. She walked straight through the door, Quinn at her shoulder, and set the leather pouch on the desk with a heavy thunk. $5,000, Willa said. "As agreed. I will need a receipt and the deed to my ranch." Carmichael's face went through several interesting contortions. Behind him, Price and Sutton, who had clearly been meeting with him again, looked equally shocked. "Miss Nelson, I did not expect, that is, you assumed I would fail," Willa said calmly. "You were wrong. The money is all there. Count it if you like." Carmichael opened the pouch with shaking hands and began counting. It took him 10 minutes, and his face got redder with each bill. Finally, he looked up. "This is correct." "Then we are done here," Willa said. "Who is this man?" Sutton demanded, glaring at Quinn. "Did you marry someone?" "Because if you did, the loan terms are fulfilled," Quinn said softly, and there was something in his voice that made Sutton stop talking. "The lady paid you in full. Give her the deed." Carmichael fumbled with the safe behind his desk and pulled out the deed, signed it over with jerky movements, and shoved it across the desk at Willa. She picked it up, checked it carefully, and nodded. "Pleasure doing business with you, gentlemen," she said, and she let the last word drip with sarcasm. She walked out of that bank with Quinn beside her, and this time when she stood in the sunlight, she felt like she could breathe for the first time in days. "That felt good," she admitted. "Looked good too," Quinn said. "Did you see Carmichael's face?" Willa laughed, and it surprised her, the sound bubbling up from some place that had been locked down tight for too long. "I will remember that look for the rest of my life." They rode back to the ranch in high spirits, and life settled into a new rhythm. Quinn worked hard, up before dawn and rarely stopping until after dark. He was good with the cattle, better with horses, and had a knack for fixing things that were broken. Within 2 weeks, the ranch was running more smoothly than it had in months, but it was more than just the physical work. Quinn brought an energy to the place, a sense of possibility. He joked with Pete and Samuel, turning morning chores into something almost fun. He cooked sometimes when Willa was exhausted, making surprisingly good biscuits and coffee that did not taste like mud. He fixed the porch steps without being asked and repaired the leaky roof on the barn, and he talked to Willa. In the evenings after dinner, when Pete and Samuel had gone to their bunks, Quinn would linger in the kitchen and they would talk. About the ranch at first, about plans for the cattle drive, about where to sell, about prices and timing. But gradually, the conversations shifted to other things. He told her about growing up in Missouri, about his parents who had died of cholera, about working his way west. She told him about her mother, about learning to rope from her father, about the loneliness of the past year. "You ever get tired?" Quinn asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of orange and purple. Of having to be strong all the time, Willa thought about that. "Yes," she said finally, "but I do not know how to be anything else." "You do not have to be," Quinn said quietly. "Not all the time, not with people you trust." "I barely know you," Willa pointed out, but her heart was not in the argument. "You know I kept my word," Quinn said. "You know I work hard. You know I have not done anything to make you uncomfortable or unsafe." That is a start. It was a start. And over the next weeks, as spring deepened into early summer, it became more. Willa found herself watching for Quinn in the mornings, found her mood lifting when she heard his laugh from across the yard. She noticed things about him, small things. The way he always made sure she ate enough at meals. The way he gentled a nervous horse. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She was in trouble, and she knew it. It was Pete who brought it up, catching her staring at Quinn as he worked with a wild yearling in the corral. "That boy is sweet on you," Pete said, not unkindly. Willa jerked her attention back to the fence she was supposed to be mending. "We have a business arrangement." "Sure you do," Pete said. "And I am the King of England. Willa, I have known you since you were 10 years old. I have never seen you look at anyone the way you look at him." "It is complicated," Willa said weakly. "Life is complicated," Pete said. "That does not mean you should miss out on something good when it comes along. But it was complicated. Quinn had loaned her money, was working for her. There was a power imbalance there, even if it did not feel like it. And what if she was wrong? What if she was reading things into his kindness that were not there? She could not afford to make a mistake, not when the ranch was finally stable again. Except Quinn looked at her the same way she looked at him. She caught him at it sometimes, his eyes on her with an expression that made her breath catch. And there were moments when they accidentally touched, reaching for the same tool or passing in a doorway, when the air seemed to crackle between them. It came to a head in June, when they drove the cattle to market. It was a 10-day trip to the railhead, and they hired on 4 extra hands for the drive. It was brutal work, long days in the saddle, dust and heat and ornery cattle that wanted to scatter in every direction. But they made good time, and the cattle were in good condition when they reached the stockyards. Willa got a fair price, better than she had hoped, and suddenly she had money again. Real money. Enough to pay off Quinn's loan with interest and have plenty left over for operating expenses and improvements. They stayed in town that night, the whole crew, celebrating at the saloon. Willa did not usually drink, but she had one whiskey and then another, and the world took on a pleasant glow. Quinn stayed close, not hovering, but there if she needed him. When one of the hired hands got too friendly, trying to pull Willa into a dance, Quinn was there with a hand on the man's shoulder and a few quiet words that sent him backing off. "My hero," Willa said, and she meant it teasingly, but it came out softer than she intended. "Any time," Quinn said, and he was not smiling. They walked back to the boarding house together, the hired hand staying behind to keep celebrating. The night air was cool and clear, and Willa could see a million stars overhead. She was pleasantly buzzed, happy, and more relaxed than she had been in months. "I can pay you back," she said as they climbed the stairs to the second floor, where they had rooms across the hall from each other. "The full loan with interest, first thing tomorrow." "All right," Quinn said. "You do not sound excited," Willa said, fumbling with her key. "I am happy for you," Quinn said. "Just means I will be moving on soon, I guess." Willa froze with the key halfway to the lock. "Moving on." "That was the deal, right?" Quinn said. His voice was carefully neutral. "I work until the loan is repaid. Loan will be repaid tomorrow." "You want to leave?" Willa asked, and her chest felt tight. "Did not say that," Quinn said. Willa turned to face him. They were very close in the narrow hallway, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, could smell the soap and leather scent of him. "Then what are you saying?" "I am saying the loan was business," Quinn said slowly. "And working as a ranch hand was business. But what I feel for you, Willa, that has nothing to do with business." Her heart was hammering. "What do you feel?" "Everything," Quinn said simply. "I feel everything. I think about you all the time. I want to make you smile. I want to make sure you never have to beg anyone for anything ever again. I want to wake up on that ranch every day and know I get to see you." He stopped, took a breath. "But I will not say any of that if it is not what you want. I will take the loan repayment, I will stay on as a hired hand if you want, and I will keep my mouth shut about the rest." "And if I do want it," Willa whispered. "Then tell me," Quinn said. "Tell me this is not just me." Willa reached up and put her hand on his chest, felt his heart pounding as hard as hers. "It is not just you. I was so afraid it was just me." Quinn made a sound that was half laugh, half groan, and then his hands were framing her face and he was kissing her. It was not careful or tentative. It was desperate and sure all at once, like something that had been held back too long finally breaking free. Willa kissed him back with everything she had, her hands fisting in his shirt, and it felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I am in love with you," he said. "Have been for weeks, maybe since the day I saw you walk out of that bank with your head high and fire in your eyes." "I love you too," Willa said, and saying it out loud was like letting light into a dark room. "I did not want to. It seemed like such a bad idea." "Terrible idea," Quinn agreed, but he was grinning. "What do we do now?" Willa asked. "Well, we are not having this conversation in a boarding house hallway," Quinn said. "That much I know. Tomorrow we go home. You pay off the loan which clears that business between us. Then I court you properly if you will let me." "Court me?" Willa raised an eyebrow. "We just confessed we love each other." "I do not care," Quinn said stubbornly. "You deserve to be courted. You deserve flowers and nice words and someone trying to impress you. You deserve romance, Willa Nelson, and I am going to give it to you." Willa felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind. "You really mean that?" "Every word," Quinn said. He kissed her again, softer this time. "Now get some sleep. We have a long ride home tomorrow." It was the longest 10 days of Willa's life heading back to the ranch. Not because it was hard, but because now that everything was out in the open between her and Quinn, all she wanted was to be near him. But they had the hired hands with them, and Pete and Samuel watching with knowing looks, and it would not be proper to be obvious about it. Still, Quinn found ways. He rode beside her whenever he could. He brought her coffee in the mornings before she even asked. He smiled at her across the campfire at night in a way that made her feel warm from the inside out. And once, when they were checking the herd at dawn and no one else was around, he caught her hand and squeezed it gently before letting go. "Soon," he promised, and she knew what he meant. When they finally got back to the ranch, Willa paid the hired hands and sent them on their way. Then she sat down at the kitchen table with Quinn and counted out the money she owed him, including every penny of interest. "We are square," she said, pushing the stack of bills across to him. Quinn picked up the money, looked at it for a long moment, then set it back down. "I want to invest this in the ranch," he said. "As a partner. If you will have me," Willa's breath caught. "Quinn, you worked 5 years to save that money." "And I am choosing to invest it in something I believe in," Quinn said. "In someone I believe in. I am not asking for charity, Willa. I am asking to build something with you. Equal partners in the ranch and in everything else if you will have me for that too." "You want to be partners," Willa said slowly. "Partners and eventually more if you are willing," Quinn said. "I want to marry you, Willa. I know it is fast, and we can take as much time as you need, but I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything." Willa looked at this man who had walked into her life at exactly the right moment, who had given her a way out without asking her to sacrifice her dignity, who had worked beside her and laughed with her, and somehow made her believe in possibility again. "Yes," she said. "Yes to partners or yes to marriage?" Quinn asked carefully. "Both," Willa said, and she was grinning. "Yes to all of it." Quinn let out a whoop of joy that brought Pete and Samuel running from the bunkhouse, worried something was wrong. When they saw Quinn sweep Willa up and spin her around, both of them laughing, Pete just shook his head and went back inside. But Samuel stayed, leaning against the doorframe with a satisfied smile. "About time," he called. "We have been waiting for you two to figure it out." They got married in August, a small ceremony in Kingman with Pete and Samuel as witnesses, and half the town turning out because everyone loved a good love story. Willa wore a dress that the seamstress had worked on for weeks, white cotton with lace at the collar and sleeves. Quinn wore a new suit and looked so handsome it made her heart ache. But the best part was not the ceremony, though that was lovely. The best part was when Carmichael came to the general store while Willa was shopping for supplies, Quinn beside her. The banker had tried to make small talk, tried to act like there was nothing awkward between them. Quinn had simply put his arm around Willa's waist, pulled her close, and said, "My wife and I have business to attend to. Excuse us." The look on Carmichael's face had been priceless. Life on the ranch settled into something better than Willa had ever imagined. Quinn was as good as his word about being an equal partner. They made decisions together, worked together, and slowly improved the ranch until it was not just surviving but thriving. They hired on 2 more full-time hands, which took some of the burden off Pete and Samuel, who were looking forward to easing into semi-retirement. Quinn built onto the ranch house that fall, adding 2 more bedrooms because, as he said with a meaningful look, they would need the space eventually. Willa blushed but did not argue. She wanted children, wanted to fill this house and this land with family. Winter came, cold and crisp, and Willa discovered that she liked being married. Liked having someone to warm the bed at night, liked the easy companionship of cooking dinner together, liked the way Quinn looked at her like she was the most precious thing in his world. He had kept his promise about romance too. He brought her wildflowers in the spring. He learned to make her favorite dessert, a berry cobbler, and surprised her with it on random evenings. He wrote her notes and left them where she would find them. Simple things like, "You are beautiful," or "Thank you for being you." And when she found out in February that she was pregnant, Quinn had actually cried. Happy tears, his hands on her still flat belly and his face full of wonder. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "You are going to be a father," Willa said, her own eyes wet. "A good one." "I am going to try," Quinn promised. "God, Willa, I am going to try so hard." Their son was born in October 1883, a squalling red-faced bundle that they named Jacob after Willa's father. Quinn was terrified of holding him at first, this tiny, fragile thing, but within days he was a natural. Willa would wake in the night to feed the baby and find Quinn already up, changing Jacob's diaper and talking to him in a low, soothing voice about the ranch, about the horses, about how loved he was. Pete and Samuel, who had both agreed to stay on indefinitely as much for the company as the work, doted on little Jacob. The whole ranch seemed to revolve around this new life, and Willa felt a contentment she had not known was possible. But more than that, she felt safe. When she looked at Quinn holding their son, when she worked beside him during the day and fell asleep in his arms at night, she knew she had found something rare. She had found someone who saw her strength and loved her for it, who had made sure she never had to beg, who had given her partnership and respect and love in equal measure. "I have been thinking," Quinn said one evening. They were on the porch, watching the sunset with Jacob asleep in Willa's arms. "About that day at the bank when you first came out looking so angry and lost." "I remember," Willa said. "I almost did not say anything," Quinn admitted. "Almost figured it was not my business, that you would not want some stranger bothering you, but something made me speak up. Some feeling that if I let you walk away, I would regret it for the rest of my life." "I am glad you spoke up," Willa said softly. "I am glad you offered to help. I am glad you stayed." "Best decision I ever made," Quinn said. He put his arm around her shoulders, careful not to jostle the baby. "You know what the second best decision was?" "What?" "Deciding to love you out loud," Quinn said. "Deciding to tell you instead of keeping it to myself. I was scared you would say no, that I would ruin everything. But taking that risk gave me this. Gave me you and Jacob and a home and a life I did not even know I wanted until I found it." Willa leaned into him, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steadiness. "They wanted me broken," she said quietly. "Those men in the bank, they wanted me desperate and begging so they could feel powerful." "But you did not break," Quinn said. "No," Willa agreed. "I did not break, and you made sure I did not have to." "You would have found a way," Quinn said. "Even without me, you are too strong to stay down." "Maybe," Willa said, "but I am glad I did not have to find out. I am glad you were there." They sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars began to appear. Inside the house, Willa could see the lamps glowing warm and golden. Tomorrow there would be work to do, cattle to tend, a ranch to run. But tonight there was just this moment, this peace. Jacob stirred in her arms, making little snuffling sounds, and both parents looked down at him with matching expressions of wonder and love. "We are going to do right by him," Quinn said. "Teach him to be strong and kind. Teach him to stand up for people who need it." "We will," Willa agreed. "We will teach him that true strength is not about making others feel small. It is about lifting them up." Quinn kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Willa Everett." "I love you too," Willa said, savoring the sound of her married name. "More than I ever thought I could love anyone." The years rolled on, good years full of hard work and laughter and growth. The ranch prospered under their joint management. They had a daughter 2 years after Jacob, a fierce little girl with her mother's dark hair and her father's eyes that they named Ruth. And then another son 3 years after that, a calm, sweet boy they named Thomas. Pete passed peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1888, and they buried him on a hill overlooking the ranch with a headstone that read, "A good man and true friend." Samuel followed 2 years later, and they laid him beside Pete. Willa cried for days, mourning these men who had been like family, but life continued as it always did. Jacob grew tall and serious, learning the ranch from his parents. Ruth was wild and fearless, always climbing things and bringing home injured animals to nurse. Thomas was the quiet one, the reader, the one who could sit for hours watching the world. Quinn's hair started going gray at the temples, and Willa found laugh lines forming at the corners of her eyes. They had been married 15 years when she caught him looking at her one morning with an expression she could not quite read. "What?" she asked, self-conscious. "Just thinking," Quinn said, "about how I almost missed this, how I almost rode right past Kingman that spring and never met you." "But you did not," Willa pointed out. "But I could have," Quinn said. "Makes me grateful every single day that I stayed, that I saw you coming out of that bank, that I made the choice to help instead of walking away." "You changed my life," Willa said seriously. "You know that, right? Not just by loaning me the money, though that was huge, but by seeing me, by treating me like an equal, by loving me without trying to change me." "You changed mine right back," Quinn said. He pulled her close, and she went willingly, still fitting against him perfectly after all these years. "You gave me a home, a family, a purpose. Everything I have, everything I am, is because you let me love you." They stood there in the kitchen of the house they had built together, holding each other while the sounds of their children arguing over breakfast echoed from the other room, and Willa thought about how differently things could have gone. If she had begged that day in the bank. If she had given up her dignity for their mercy. If Quinn had not been there with his offer, his help, his love. But she had not begged. and Quinn had been there. And together they had built something that those bankers could never touch, never diminish. They had built a life on respect and partnership and love, and it was more valuable than any amount of money. That evening, after the children were in bed, Quinn and Willa rode out to their favorite spot on the ranch, a rise that overlooked the valley. They had been coming here for years, whenever they needed to think or talk or just be together. The sunset was spectacular, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange and purple. "I want to grow old with you," Quinn said. "Right here on this land with our kids and eventually their kids. I want to spend every day for the rest of my life making sure you know how much you are loved." "You already do that," Willa said. "Every single day." "Then I will keep doing it," Quinn said simply. "Because you deserve it, because you never had to beg for anything with me and you never will." Willa felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind. "That was what you gave me, you know. More than the money, more than anything else. You gave me my dignity when they wanted to take it. You gave me the choice to stand tall." "You were always going to stand tall," Quinn said. "That is who you are. I just made sure you had the tools to do it." They rode back to the ranch as the stars came out, and Willa felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. Her life had not been easy. There had been loss and struggle and hard times, but there had also been joy and love and triumph. She had faced down men who wanted to see her fail and had won. She had taken a chance on a stranger with gray-green eyes and had found her soulmate. She had built a life that was entirely her own, shaped by her choices and her strength. And through it all, Quinn had been there. Not controlling, not diminishing, but supporting and loving and standing beside her as an equal. He had made sure she never had to beg, never had to sacrifice who she was for survival. He had seen her worth when others tried to deny it, and he had loved her not in spite of her strength but because of it. That was the real gift, Willa thought as they unsaddled their horses and walked hand in hand back to the house. Not the money, though that had saved the ranch. Not even the help, though that had been invaluable. The real gift was being seen, being valued, being loved for exactly who she was. Inside, the house was quiet, the children asleep, the lamps burning low. Quinn checked on each child while Willa got ready for bed, and when he came into their room his face was soft with love. "They are all sleeping like angels," he reported, "which means they will probably be terrors tomorrow." Willa laughed. "Probably." Ruth was talking about wanting to learn to break horses. "She is 8, Quinn said, but he was smiling. "I was roping by 8, Willa pointed out. "Fair point," Quinn conceded. He climbed into bed beside her and she curled into his side, her head on his chest. "I love our life," he said quietly. "I love what we built together." "Me too," Willa said. "Every messy, beautiful, complicated bit of it." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Willa dreamed of the future, of watching their children grow, of becoming grandparents someday, of growing old on this land with this man who had changed everything. Years later, when Jacob brought home a girl he wanted to marry, Willa and Quinn sat on the porch and watched their son, now a man, nervous and excited as he introduced his intended. The girl was smart and capable, and she looked Jacob in the eye when she spoke to him, and Willa approved immediately. "You raised him right," Quinn said that night. "He picked a partner, not someone to control." "We raised him right," Willa corrected. "This was both of us." "Both of us," Quinn agreed. "Always both of us." And when Ruth, at 21, announced she wanted to start her own horse breeding operation on a corner of the ranch, Quinn had simply nodded and asked what she needed. No questions about whether she could handle it, no suggestions that she find a husband to help her. Just support and belief. Thomas went to college back east, became a teacher, and came home every summer to help with the ranch and tell stories about his students. All three children grew into capable, confident adults, and Willa knew that was because they had been raised by parents who showed them what real partnership looked like. The ranch continued to prosper. They expanded the herd, bought adjoining land when it came available, built a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. Willa's hair went from dark to gray, and Quinn's face grew lined with age, but they still rode out together most mornings, still worked side by side, still loved each other with the same intensity they had at the beginning. On their 30th anniversary, Quinn surprised Willa with a trip back to Kingman. The town had grown, changed, but the bank was still there. Carmichael had long since retired, disgraced after some financial scandal, and the bank was under new management. But Quinn wanted to take Willa there anyway, to stand on the spot where their story had really begun. "Right here," he said, stopping outside the bank. "This is where I first saw you, coming through that door, looking like you wanted to burn the whole place down." "I did want to burn it down," Willa admitted, "but that would have been illegal," Quinn laughed. "This is where I fell in love with you, you know, right here, before we even spoke. You looked so fierce, so determined not to let them break you, and I thought, that is a woman worth knowing." "And 30 years later?" Willa asked. 30 years later I would do it all again in a heartbeat," Quinn said. He took her hand, raised it to his lips. "You are still fierce, still strong, still the most incredible person I have ever known." "I love you," Willa said, "for seeing me, for helping me, for staying." "Always," Quinn promised. "For as long as I am breathing, I am staying." They grew old together on the ranch, surrounded by children and grandchildren, by the land they loved and the life they had built. And every day, in ways big and small, Quinn made sure Willa knew she was valued, respected, loved. She never had to beg for anything, not his attention or his affection or his respect. It was given freely, joyfully, completely. And when they were very old, sitting on that same porch where they had shared so many evenings, Willa looked at her husband and felt overwhelming gratitude, not just for the help he had given her so long ago, but for the life they had created together, for choosing partnership over power, for building something based on mutual respect and love. "No regrets?" Quinn asked, as if reading her mind. "Not a single one," Willa said, and she meant it with her whole heart. They lived out their days on the ranch they loved, surrounded by family, secure in the knowledge that they had done something right. They had built a life where no one had to beg, where strength was honored, where love was given freely. And in the end, that was the greatest victory of all.